clap to do.
Good evening, everybody.
We're not.
It's 7 o'clock, so it was so much fun last night, we thought we'd get back together again tonight. So I'll call the meeting to order. Councilmember Baker is still out of town, so she will not be here this evening. Next week we have one presentation, which is the presentation of the town's comprehensive annual financial report. And Jenny is here, and she will be, we don't have a presentation tonight, it'll all be next week.
Yes,
Correct?
yeah, the
Okay.
auditors are coming to do a little overview and.
Okay, awesome, so stay tuned for that. Are there any questions or comments on anything about that before we move on?
Very excited about the auditors coming.
You would be.
I tend to be, actually.
I thought the auditors had already given us a clean bill of health, wasn't that what you
They,
said?
they presented to us,
Yes.
they're gonna present it to you all.
Well, that is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yes.
They have to show the results.
Exactly. So we have some public hearings next week, and the first one is an ordinance to consider ZODA 1803 to amend Chapter 78 zoning to permit and establish limitations on short-term rentals as an accessory use to a residential dwelling unit, provided certain standards are met, whereas they are currently not permitted, and to define this term. So basically, this is the Airbnb ordinance. Before we get started, I will call for disclosures, and I believe I may be the only one who has one. So I'll begin, and at the end of my disclosure, I will pass the gavel, the imaginary gavel, over to Vice Mayor Olem. So for the record, I own a rental home in California with my husband, and although this matter may not have application solely to property or business in which I have a personal interest, I will recuse myself and disqualify myself from presiding and voting on this transaction. I have filed the appropriate disclosure with the town clerk and town attorney, and will ask if there are other disclosures of council. I don't believe there are. Okay. All right, so with that, I will recognize Councilmember Olem, or Vice Mayor Olem, and then when you guys are done, I will, somebody come get me.
Okay.
I'll be at my
So
meeting.
we're gonna recognize David Tronhofer, our zoning administrator, for the staff report.
All right, good evening, Vice Mayor, members of council. So yes, this is ZODA number 1803, which is our short-term rental zoning ordinance. So the purpose of this one is, one, the massive growth of the sharing economy, which did lead to state code changes. In 2017, the General Assembly passed legislation which led to Virginia Code 15.2-983, which is language specific to short-term rentals. So short-term rentals are both unregulated and undefined in the zoning ordinance. So the purpose of this is to define the use and then establish standards for it. And so this will allow the good operators to obtain permits and have some predictability in running their short-term rental and supplementing their income. But it also gives the enforcement staff the tools that they need to go after any bad actors that might be out there. So this was initially, the initial resolution was passed by the council back in June of 2018. And there have been 6 sets of planning commission meetings on this. That's work session and public hearing. There's a lot of debate on this one.
I have a question. How is Airbnb different from just renting out if you have a basement, or not a basement, but a guest room, and you rent it out to somebody?
Any short-term rental is defined as less than 30 days. Anything over 30 is not a short-term rental, it's just anyone
Rental.
renting.
Rental.
It's a standard rental, yeah.
It's a rental.
It's a rental.
So one of the provisions that we have is a residency requirement. And the point of this provision in there is really to prevent investors from just coming in, buying up a lot of properties and basically making them mini hotels in the middle of the neighborhood. So it has to be your primary residence for at least 7 of the previous 12 months. So when you come in and apply for your permit, you provide 2 forms of documentation that show you've actually lived at the house for at least the previous 7 months. And if you are not the actual owner of the house, but you're a long-term renter there, you are still eligible to do your own short-term rental, but you also need then the owner's permission as well as the 7-month residency at that location. If the house or condo does belong to either a homeowners association or a condo association, then you do have to provide evidence that you've notified them of your intent to operate a short-term rental.
I have one question on that. Does the state reg overrule the local HOAs that say you can't do that?
If you have an HOA that prohibits you from doing it, that would still stand.
Okay,
But again, as the town, we wouldn't be looking at what your HOA
The
says.
HOAs are pretty
okay,
powerful.
thank you. Thanks, just wanted to check. Cesar?
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna hold, but, so when you said the primary residence, at least I thought I heard you say previous. Does that mean this is an annual recertification for people or reapplication?
It's every 2 years, but you would have to reapply.
So, but someone could conceivably fall beyond the 7 or in that 2-year period. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, so if it's not annual, then shouldn't that be 14 months? If it's 2 years?
I mean, I guess you could have a gap in between where someone would live there for 7 months, move out.
And then I could rent it out for the remainder of those 2-year period.
Wait a minute, weren't you saying that it's the owner who has to have lived there for 7 of the previous 12
No,
months?
it just has to be the resident who's there.
Right.
So a rental person could sublet it.
Right, but we're not the person that you're renting it to via Airbnb.
Am I thinking too much into it?
We looked at doing it annually, but we have a few other types of permits that have annual renewals, and they do get to be fairly burdensome on
Okay.
people who are doing, have to come in and get those permits. That was part of the reason why we decided to go with the 2-year instead.
Okay.
And again, we do have the ability to re-inspect the property in between those 2-year periods if we get a complaint or we believe there's something going on there.
Thank you.
So one of the other provisions is the maximum number of nights. So if you live there all the time and all you want to do is rent out just a room in your house, then for that, there is no limit on the maximum number of nights per year where you can do that. And that's fairly common with how a lot of the surrounding localities are doing it. The 90-night maximum comes where if you wanted to rent out your entire house, you're completely gone, but you want to rent out the entire house. So if you work a few weeks in a different state and you rent out your entire house, so that's where that 90-night cap is. Again, if you're there and you're just renting out a room, then there is no limit on that.
So if I'm in my house and I want to rent out through B&B, let's say, my basement, but I'm still staying in my house, so it doesn't have to go through the short-term rental, 90 days?
You still
and
have to
90
go
days?
through and get your permit.
Okay.
You're just not limited to the 90 days at that
Okay.
point, yes. Now, there are some exceptions. Fairfax County, who is,
Just passed, right?
it was towards the very end of 2018 or beginning of 2019. They're probably the most restrictive. They don't care whether you're renting out a room or whether it's your whole house. It's just limited to a maximum 60 days per year, and that's it. Loudon, and I'll caveat this because they haven't adopted their language yet, so this is just their latest proposal, it may change. They're taking the same approach, but their number is 180 days per year, but they don't care whether it's the entire house or just a room, but it is that higher 180. And there is a limit on the number of adults per rental period. So the proposed language has 6 adults as the maximum. This is also what Fairfax did. Some of the other localities took the approach of saying 2 per bedroom, or again, Loudon's proposal is up to 10. Arlington was 6 or 2 per bedroom, whichever is greater. So if you do a larger house, it does allow you to have larger people. The important thing to kind of note here is that you're limited to 1 rental contract per night. So if you do have you know, those 6 adults, they often know each other and be one group that's coming together. It's not 6 different individual people who are all trying to book that house, a different room in that house, for that one particular night.
So, again, when it comes to single family area with, let's say zoning R10 or R15, the houses may have 3-4 bedrooms, right?
Mhm.
So in that case, do we wanna do probably 2 people per bedroom or still 6?
Well, it's 6 adults, so, you do still have children there. I mean, you really could go either way. I don't know that one is significantly better or worse than the other route. It seemed to make the most sense and give people who do operate them just kind of an easier way to understand the regulations.
So we're not. Is this
doing the-
6 total adults in the house, including the guest, or 6 guests above what you have living in your house?
6 during a specific rental period.
6 renters coming in, or a total of 6
Including the
adults in the
residents.
house at that time? There's a difference. I've got 4 people living in my house, and I've got 6 people I'm gonna rent the house to while I'm there. And they're all adults.
For that, it would be a rental period, but that's also why we have some of the other provisions in
Okay.
place to try and keep that in check. And really, it's the next one, it's the parking. So you do have to provide minimum parking, but it's also maximum parking. So, again, during any rental period, for a single family, you cannot have any more than 2 vehicles that don't live at the property on site. So you're limited to the maximum of those 2 cars. But you do also have to prove that you can accommodate 2 vehicles there in order to get your permit in the first place. Is there,
So we are allowing, sorry. We are allowing 6 people, whether it's even if it's a townhouse, the maximum people, non-resident is 6. And then we're saying 1 car. 1 car cannot fit 6 people to come in.
Yes, it can.
Some can.
I know, but not most of the cars.
So maximum 2 non-resident cars. Oh, I see.
No,
for a single family, for a townhouse or condo, it'll be 1 vehicle. Again, if you rent out your entire townhouse and you have 6 people in a family, you could bring that 1 vehicle in.
And this has to be on site, it can't be like on-street parking.
Correct.
Off street,
Yeah, all your parking is required to be on site for these.
That's good.
So that's gonna limit.
I don't know how you
That's gonna
manage
limit
that.
down to mostly on an average 5. It's not everybody may have 6 or 7 seater, right? Most people have 5-seater.
But if there is
You have to check
a-
boxes. If you don't have a check box, it doesn't qualify, so,
Right, I mean, a lot of this
6
is
adults.
right, for 1 car.
reviewing during the application process, and again, there's always an inspection before you can start doing your short-term rental. Any type of events are prohibited during a rental period. So you can't, rent a house just to hold a wedding there, or turn it into a party house. That's been more of an issue on the West Coast, but it's certainly a problem, and you have to have that in your advertisement for the short-term rental.
So are those 6 people though allowed to have a karaoke or something?
No, they wouldn't be.
No?
So,
It's your family, right?
it's a friend.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
it's,
Um,
I don't think we're gonna get into it quite regulating what's going on behind closed doors. And if you guys wanna play Monopoly, I'm assuming they can do that. If they wanna do family karaoke, they can do that.
So the
Right.
reason I'm
They're just
asking
not
this
inviting
question
people.
is, this is the right time to ask all these questions
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
make the best possible rules we can so that, we can accommodate people at the same time, we don't create chaos.
I think your
In the
question
neighborhood,
was
so-
though, like, can the family
I think where he's trying to go with that is, going with what the attorney's trying to say is, we can't regulate what's in the house, because
Right.
there's no way for us to enforce that. However, we can't, in some college towns, some of these Airbnbs will say, we're renting with a keg in the basement.
Yes.
And we want to nip that in the bud, so that's not in the ad, to then draw that element in, to then it's gonna end up as a police matter down.
Blacksburg case study at the end.
Exactly. So there were some write-ups on that about 6-8 months ago where they would add as an incentive, a keg in the basement, and free access to it, or open bar, free access to it, place. We're trying to discourage that.
Well, I think that falls under the broader definition of event.
Right.
Right, you're promoting an event.
Right.
At that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, that clears it up, because I was kind of going down that same path. Like,
Yeah.
what's to prohibit any, the town from not allowing a bigger get-together? And I think that's the
Right.
definition for me, it's the event.
Right, if it's being advertised, we'll be able to pick up on the advertisement, and we'll be able to intercede.
That makes sense. Okay.
If it pops up on its own, naturally, intrinsically inside the house, it's a whole different matter.
And like most violations, if somebody, accidentally does something and it's a one-off, they're not intentionally doing something wrong, and two, if it's just, a one-off, we're probably not gonna notice or catch that it happens. But people who are purposely trying to use this nefariously, I'll say, they're gonna be violating many of these different provisions, and that's kind of how we go after, and why we need the tools to do that. And then lastly for this is, you do have to have some safety equipment in there, so fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, and any rental room has to have egress from it. So like I mentioned, you do have to come in and apply for a permit. It's a $200 fee for that. That does have an initial inspection, good for 2 years. We can re-inspect again if the inspector finds something just in their normal duties, or if we receive complaints on it. There is still a amendment to Chapter 14, a rental registry, which we plan on creating. And for that, if you're not registered, that's a $500 violation that could occur with it. So again, this did go to the Planning Commission a number of times. We're recommending approval of the ZODA. There is some time flexibility if the council is uncomfortable and wants staff to provide additional information. That's something that we can certainly do. But do you have any questions? Or anything specifically you want me to provide for the next public hearing?
I have one more question.
Okay, Freddie.
So let's say an investor buys a property and then he puts somebody in who is an authorized resident of that property who lives 7 out of 12 months. And then I have authorized that resident to do the short-term rental. I'm an investor. How does that work out?
That, it really isn't any different than if you were an investor who bought a house and then just had somebody living there long-term. I mean, at the end of the day, you still have a resident who's living there long-term every day, which is really what we're trying to get.
Take care of the property.
Right, and just, have some stability of someone who is staying there, whether or not they're the original owner or happen to be a long-term renter who's there.
Sydney, if someone doesn't sign up, doesn't sign the registry and they pay this $500 violation, what if they continue to not sign up?
It's a repeated fee.
Okay, so, all right, thanks. Anybody else? Bill?
Is there anything coming down the pike from the state saying that they're gonna superimpose anything if we don't put a town mandate on something?
The only specific legislation that the General Assembly has produced is the registry that provides for
Okay.
the $500 fine. They have left the rest to the
Yeah.
localities to work out themselves.
So-
So I think it's been 2 years since
Okay.
they've given us any new legislation.
I just don't want us to be Happy New Year, we didn't do anything, oh, all of a sudden, oh, by the way, all the stuff that is
No,
done by the
no,
I haven't
it's not like
seen-
Okay.
yours.
Okay.
No.
Well, like right of ways?
Did you have any questions?
I'm good, thank
So, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I know we have zoning, and are we changing our zoning that says you can only have 4 adults that are unrelated living in a home? But now you can rent out for up to, how many days, 90? Did we, a year?
Let me get back and clarify
Okay.
that specific point for you.
Okay, thank you.
And the max number too, sorry.
Say
The
so.
max number.
I mean, other zoning provisions that exist, they don't just go away during that. So maybe we can, you know, make some fine-tune adjustments to the language to try and make that a
For
little
example,
more
in
clear.
the daycare, if
Pretty-
you allow 6 people, sorry. If you allow 6 people and you already have 2 kids in your house, then actually you're allowed to only have 4. Or if you are allowed 4, if you already have 2 kids at your house, in-house, then only you are allowed to take only 2 kids from outside or something like that.
That's a special exception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for daycares, you have
Yeah.
that, where if you have the
Yeah.
5 or fewer, then you can do that, but yeah, with the special exception.
It's in the charter.
Yeah.
See, I've forgotten what I was gonna say. Oh, okay.
I just thought you didn't know that.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? So since we have more questions, we're just going to have our first public hearing. Sorry, I've lost my,
Well, I think if you come back with
you're gonna
some
come
of your
back
questions
with.
regarding the 4
Yeah.
versus 6, if that's kosher according
We
to.
can get those answered probably by email here in
Yeah,
the next day or
yeah,
two.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That doesn't have to wait till, that doesn't have to wait till the public hearing.
All right.
Agreed.
And if it doesn't have to,
Okay,
if it passes the smell test, I say we move forward.
and do we want to have more than one public hearing on this? Because I know it's been something that a lot of people have talked about, and
It
We've
would
had
be
a lot of
entirely,
concerns.
it would be up to your discretion. Nobody showed, although we had a great deal of people show up at the first planning commission public hearing on this way back when, on adoption night, there was nobody. And then they talked about it at other planning commissions in between, there's nobody there for those either. So I don't know if that could be, if that's an arbiter to you or not, it's just trying to keep it.
Well, that's the thing, most people that were there weren't from Herndon.
The first one, yeah, and actually, as we joke, it was a very interesting mixture of folks in that audience.
People literally flew into
Yes.
Dulles Airport for that
Yeah.
particular
Okay.
situation. Yeah.
I think the parking
First
is one of the
Amendment,
big issues that I've heard in the single-family home neighborhoods where people were renting out 2 and 3 rooms and bringing in 2 and 3 additional cars to non-related people that were working in town. And they were having 2 and 3 Airbnbs on a street, and it was causing some issues.
There's one street in particular, we were getting several complaints on strange cars coming in and out, and it was attributed on the Airbnb.
That may be the one I'm thinking of.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Can someone retrieve?
Get the mayor?
I'm closest, I win.
Just curious.
Make sure you got
do
mouth
have to
on.
leave the guidance?
Yes.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Best practice.
It just means that your facial
Don't worry, I'll
expressions
just-
don't.
Okay.
I get that.
There's no
but isn't-
question about whether she was involved or not, or anybody that recused.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
We recuse ourselves all the time without leaving the guidance.
The council's voting.
Oh,
We
well,
discuss.
no, we don't recuse ourselves, we
They just,
say.
I got back on the
Yeah,
island.
awesome.
Right.
Yeah, big difference.
Okay, thank you guys, and thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. The next several ordinances are all leases that we typically do most every year, so we will jump right into those. The first one is to approve and authorize a lease agreement between the town and Eldon Street Players for space at 750 Center Street, and I'll turn it over to the town attorney for that one.
Thank you. So Lisa.
When are we getting?
This is a continuation of the lease that the Eldon Street Players Next Stop has had for many years now.
Is everything okay with you?
Just
No?
technical.
Sorry, Lisa.
Okay.
Sorry,
At
Lisa's.
750 Center Street, which is of course where Art Space is, they have space over there for storage. The request is to continue renting this property on a month-to-month basis for a maximum term of 1 year until December 31st, 2020. The rent is proposed to remain at $1 per month, and the month-to-month lease, I believe, has been in effect for 2 years now, pending the sale to council.
$1 per month or per year?
I'm sorry.
I mean, not that it matters, I just, they usually are per year, but.
Yeah, they usually are, but I want to say this one is per month.
Okay.
Let me make sure though, because you're making me second guess the language of what
We could also look at.
Yeah, it is a month,
Is it?
I really, no.
But in the past, it has been a year, yeah, annual.
So why don't we just make it annual? Because, I mean, it's.
It is annual. Shall pay landlord on demand $1 rent and shall allow town access. Yeah, it's, I misspoke. It is per
It's-
year.
Okay.
So $1 per month would be an exponential
Pretty
expense.
steep.
Go out the
Um,
percentage charts.
Okay, so that's it.
And I'm
Okay.
happy to answer any questions.
Questions on this one, Sydney, and then Cesar.
So are they paying, any of the cost of lighting and electricity and heating?
No, as I said, it's storage. Or not. We pay those things over there in janitorial. Of course, they don't need janitorial storage space.
Cesar.
Thank you. I was looking at my notes on the date. In the previous work session, we discussed, rather than doing the $1, actually doing the market rates as an ed kind.
We were, and that's why Jenny's here.
So.
That's why Jen's, she's our leasing agent,
Well,
among many
Among
other
other
hats,
things.
so I'll
Thank
come
you.
in.
We looked at that, and it didn't seem to make sense in terms of, it's just grossing up a contract, and that's space that we're not really utilizing anyway. And that's going back to the 397 space as well, the one, I'm gonna jump to that the delegate and the supervisor are using. That's space that we weren't actively marketing anyway, because we knew that we might need it for town purposes. So there isn't really a loss that we're taking, if that makes sense. I also didn't want us to run the risk of having to pay a commission on a grossed up rate, because we do have a full-service broker and a full-service lease, at least over at 397.
Yes.
And so that would have been 3% on something that basically is really $1 to us. So it would have cost us money, potentially, to do that, so.
More than 3
And,
cents.
and it's not, this space is, we're not listing it. It's not out
Right.
there in the commercial listings, so it's not affecting our leasing rates on other properties in and around the area of this, because we're holding it for town purposes.
Okay. Thank you.
But we did look into it.
makes sense.
Any other questions or
cents.
comments on this particular lease?
2 cents. 30 cents.
Okay, the next one is very similar. This is an ordinance to approve and authorize the signing of a lease between the town and Arts Herndon for their space at 750 Center Street. Turn it over to Lisa once again.
So similarly, this space is part of the downtown redevelopment and has been on a month-to-month lease for the past 2 years. The proposal is to continue the lease on a month-to-month basis through December 31st, 2020. And the rent would remain $200 per month, which it has been, I want to say, for more than 10 years. As you know, Arts Herndon occupies the space for their gallery. They conduct functions out of the space, have their offices there, as well as some storage. We would ask that you approve the lease, and it may be that, hopefully, they won't be there for an entire year, but we did give them the option through December 31st, 2020.
Sydney.
I would like to move it to $1 a year, like all the other nonprofits.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Is there a reason it hasn't always been that?
Yeah, why is it different?
I don't know,
Because
it goes
this, I
back
think,
a
predates,
long ways.
this predates any of
Yeah.
us on council or staff sitting at this table, actually.
I like that idea.
Thank
Yeah, I think it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
agreed. And if they don't use it the full year, they get a prorated return. 40 cents.
Well, I'll chip in a nickel.
Here.
Here's 12 cents.
Okay, well, I don't think that's gonna negatively impact
Yeah,
our cash flow.
absolutely.
Is that something
We
that,
will have an amended ordinance
That's
for
fine.
you to receive and to vote on.
so then is next week, then it will be a motion to approve the lease with this change or the amended lease, but that we will have
Option.
we have that language
Well,
for
we will
me?
we'll still have both out there, yes, we'll
Okay.
prepare the language.
So the language will be approving the lease, option
B.
B.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of B.
Yes.
Even on
Well,
match game, we always
I
go
just
on
like to
B.
know sort of
Be
what to
prepared,
expect, because it
yes.
gets confusing when there's amendments and things like that.
I don't
so.
think they're gonna object to this, but we will have contact with, their representatives and make
Okay.
sure they, sign both, so we know which one.
It
Perfect.
costs more than
Perfect.
legal fees to change.
But we've already advertised the 200, so.
Right, so we have to have
Yeah.
that as an option. Okay,
Hopefully.
any other questions or comments? All right. The next one is the ordinance to approve the lease for, between the town and Delegate Samira at 397 Herndon Parkway. I feel like we just had this discussion.
Yes, because for the
Right.
last year, Delegate Samara was filling the unfulfilled vacancy that Delegate Boyce left. Delegates and senators and supervisors, leases are for their terms. So this particular lease expires at the end of this year. We are proposing a new lease for the same space at the same rent, which is $1 per year, through December 31st, 2021. Delegate Samira has accepted and signed the lease, and we would ask that you approve it.
Questions, comments? Seems like we just did this a couple
We
days
did.
ago.
Yeah.
We did.
Well, because it's concurrent with the term, so we had to do it, even though he just moved in a couple months ago, so. Okay, the next one is to authorize a lease, a third lease amendment between the town and Events Analytics for space at 397 Herndon Parkway.
So Events Analytics is the one business that has been there continuously. They have expanded and contracted. They are currently contracting from approximately 4,500 square feet down to 3,500 square feet. The rent, the commensurate rent for the space would be $5,000 per month. And we are requesting a month-to-month lease with the town. They're currently in a month-to-month lease, and they just want to continue through December 31st, 2020.
Questions, comments on that? Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask this question because I wanted to learn more. So they're contracting from 4512 to 3512, which is 1,000 square feet less, which is 22% less the size. And when you see the rent, it's going down from $7,917 to $5,000, which is 37% less. So maybe the number of rooms, what was the rationale that when the size went down by 22%, the rent went down by 37%?
So we were trying to meet them in the middle because they were waiting for a contract that still hasn't come through. They initially wanted to pay us only $2,500 a month, and we said thanks but no thanks, because that space is actively marketed. And that would have dropped comparable rental rates, which wouldn't have been good for any of our other tenants. So to get both parties to a number that was still within a market range, so that translates to about $17 a square foot. They increased the amount of rent they would pay, and we decreased the amount of space they could have to get that rate per square foot to something that was more in line with market, which is $17 to $19 per square foot. So that's how that worked out. It was a bit of back and forth.
Signy.
Is, when they get this, if they get this contract, are they planning to increase the amount they pay?
They might. That would be up to, they could come back to us and request another amendment to the lease, because you would assume that if they get this contract, they're gonna expand.
Mhm.
and need the space again, and at that point, we would, because both parties, it's a month to month, have the option to cancel, so we could always exercise that option, as a means of negotiation.
They're a federal contractor, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I just looked up their information on access that I have, and they have that contract, or contracted, so.
They
They're-
got the contract?
No, they're
they've shrunk.
they shrunk.
Yes.
I look at all their, I have all their data available.
But they have been a long-term tenant and a good one, so
Mhm.
we wanted to find a workable solution and the
Yep.
CUD.
That's fine. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on that one?
Okay. Okay, so the next item is a resolution to approve and authorize the signing of a second amendment to the pilot project agreement between Vivacity Networks LLC and the town to extend the project termination date. And Lacey Dates, it's you once again.
Yes, as you know, I believe in June of 2018, the town entered into a pilot project agreement with Vivacity to provide a network of things in the downtown. They have been working on that and are almost finished. We had one extension of the agreement, and now they're requesting another extension of the agreement. They are very close. They want to move the the agreement termination date from June 30th, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. And that allows the project from the date that it is completed to extend for 2 years, to exist for 2 years. So we are requesting that, that extension and the amendment be granted. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions on that?
Can't wait to see it.
A lot of excitement around this project.
So what percentage of work has been completed so far?
Oh, no, maybe
It's 95, yeah.
95%.
Yeah.
I think they can hit the Wi-Fi in here that's
Not
No,
here,
not here.
Underground.
not here yet, but outside.
outside, okay. And you can see it if you go outside.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this? Okay, the next one is getting a lot of chatter. It's a resolution to approve and authorize the signing of an amendment to the same license agreement to include electric vehicle charging stations and related equipment. So tell us more about that.
This covers the 5%, the other 5%.
Oh, that's what they haven't done yet.
Yes, yes. So the one of the last large deliverables that remained was the electric vehicle charging station. So we are requesting that the current license agreement that they have with the town to use our public space and rights of way be amended to include an electric vehicle charging station as well as some equipment and connections in the basement of the HMC. The equipment as well as the EV charging station is depicted on a diagram that you have. There's a picture of the EV charging station. The agreement, the amendment to the license agreement lays out how the charges for the electricity will be reimbursed and charged, and also indicates the terms and conditions under which the electric vehicle charging station will operate. I'm happy to answer any questions, but this will be a conclusion of this construction of the pilot project, and then it will operate for 2 years as indicated previously.
Questions or comments on this one? Cesar?
It's just the one that we're talking about here?
Charging station?
Yes.
Yes.
It is a dual port.
Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
so two.
Thank you. I missed that in the picture. Thank you.
All good.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I was looking at the charging station that we are installing. It is CT4000 series, I believe. And I was doing Google, how long does it take to charge a vehicle, and it takes around 4 hours. Versus there are other superchargers in the market that takes 15 to 30 minutes to charge 80%, 70-80% capacity of the vehicle. So what was the rationale behind going with this one versus the superchargers?
Zero rationale on our part,
Okay.
because this is totally under the purview of Vivacity, meaning we were not giving them any parameters, specifications, or qualifications of what they were providing in the pilot program. This was totally their choice.
Their choice.
And it was free, right?
It was free? Okay.
Yeah.
We're not thinking about
And let me pause, if you remember, the original contract is free during the pilot period.
Right.
Now, once the pilot ends, there is an abandonment, we lease it from them or we buy it from them option, so it's. once
Could
the
be
pilot's
free
on.
or could have a,
Right,
and,
so it's free for 2 years and then there's the exit, one of 3 exit strategies.
So is one alternative, I know this isn't part of what we're doing right now, but is one alternative that we replace it with something that is supercharged? Or
I would
do we
imagine
just?
that's always an option at the end of 2 years.
Right.
Okay.
Bet you it costs money.
That's how they can.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
You want free Wi-Fi in your hotel or?
Now, but by the same token, at this point, we can gather data and statistics on how it's used, we can get a better understanding if it's located in the right place, and we can.
How many people get parking tickets for being there for 4 hours instead
Right,
of
so
2?
that's exactly right.
Well, I think to Councilmember DeCall's point, the 4-hour window will impact the behavior of people, right? Because if I think it's gonna take me 4 hours, maybe I don't go there, I go somewhere
Right.
else that's gonna take me.
Mhm.
I go to Mom's or something, right? So,
Is there's a supercharger? I know, it's
I-
just a
I-
regular,
No, it's right
but you
by-
would, if you have a car, you know
But
where
it's,
those are.
but you're not
Right,
gonna
right.
get towed or
Yep.
whatever.
Well, I don't want us to get too far off in the weeds, but I did recently hear about Warrenton and their Tesla charger station. Have you heard about that?
No.
Dennis Holsey actually brought this up several years ago when we were really first getting deep into the Comstock proposal, that Tesla superchargers are like a whole like marketing kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a.
Gimmick?
Well, it could be a gimmick, but I mean, it's kind of a
Wall
status
starter.
symbol kind of
Yeah,
thing. Like if you have a Tesla charging station, that means something to some people. And they're using it as an economic development tool, hoping that people, because when you drive an electric car, you've got to map out where you can go and charge. And they're hoping that they're going to have people that decide to go to Warrenton and charge their car and
Right.
spend some money while they're there, so.
And they will.
They will,
I know
so
people
that-
with Teslas and they're.
So that might be something to think about, you know, down the road, especially if this turns out to be something that's well utilized. Because then you also, there's a whole marketing thing that Tesla does that we would benefit from,
Actually
and
makes a
Warrenton
lot of
is,
sense.
That's
Yeah.
really good.
We are the
Warrenton is benefiting
destination.
from that, and it's not their dollar, it's Tesla's, just a thought.
And if people wanna use it with a 4-hour charger, can you imagine if it's 30 minutes?
Those superchargers are something
So, yeah.
else.
They just fry your batteries.
Okay, I think I got us way off in the weeds, I
No,
apologize.
It's not your
Is-
fault.
Is there any other comment or question about the charging stations?
No.
I think we're gonna get a lot of good press out of this one. We already are a little bit. All right, moving on to general items. The resolution 19G68 is to authorize project administration agreements between the town and Fairfax County for the administration of the HAMSAMS project, which is Herndon Metro Rail Station Access Management Study Project. I'm gonna be so sad when I don't get to say that anymore. This item was continued from our November 12th meeting, and I believe I will be recognizing John Irish or Mark Dusman, somebody?
John.
Okay.
That's a John.
This was continued because at the time we hadn't received the actual draft of final agreement, which was primarily more typos than anything else. Actually, as we speak, I don't know what time the Board of Supervisors are meeting, but this is being approved by the Board of Supervisors tonight at the county level. So this will just be a carry-on that they approve it, we'll approve it, and we'll both sign off on it to put us in line for the available funds that are listed here. The $3,639,000 is for the, it says design, but the design is actually part of the East Spring Street VDOT project. We are asking they incorporate this, so they obviously are asking us to pay a part of that construction additional cost. This will fund that. The second part is we had funding through the HAMSAM project funds to do the concepts for the multimodal improvement for Van Buren Complete Streets. This is now going to supplement and make available the funds we need for the completion of the right-of-way and the utility relocation and construction. So this was a missing link of funding that was in the CIP is pending, and this takes it from pending to active.
Well, I like the way that sounds. Does anybody have questions or comments on this for John?
I like it.
Signee.
So basically, we're just authorizing ourselves to accept money.
Correct.
Yes.
That was easy.
Here, take 5.8 million.
No. Right, and these funds have been in the budget with Fairfax County for several years. I think it was something around $20 million, but it had been marked toward all of these projects around the Herndon Metro Station, so we like other people's money.
That's good.
Did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, how long have we been working on this one?
2011.
Since, yeah, I was gonna say about
Yeah.
2011.
Good job.
Sounds
Just
like-
wanted to make sure people
sounds like a
understand
consent
how long it
agenda
takes to do
item.
these big projects.
Yes.
The next item on general is a whole bunch of acronyms, but it's a resolution to support RSTP and CMAQ applications, which will consider authorizing project applications to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority for those funding mechanisms to work for us and to endorse the town's transportation projects that are included in VDOT's 2020 to 2025 six-year improvement program, so.
Thank you. If it's got an acronym, it probably has Mark Dutzman.
I know, right?
But first, I'd like to introduce Jolly Mosley, fellow coworker and recently hired staff for the Community Development Department.
Hi, welcome.
She'll be serving as the town's capital project planner / engineer, and she'll be assisting me with the funding process, and also involved in regional planning issues, taking over some of former employee Kay Robertson's duties, and also eventually involved in taking projects from concept planning and into the engineering phase, hence planner / engineer. She has an engineering degree, she's a PE, and so welcome.
Welcome, we're glad to have you on board.
Thank you, it's a pleasure meeting all of you.
Good luck.
That sounded ominous.
Good luck.
May the force be with you.
Yes, you got this.
All right, Mark, so is this more about other people's money?
It is.
We like that.
It is. Staff is proposing two federal applications for fiscal year 2026, RSTP and CMAQ. RSTP stands for Regional Surface Transportation Program, and CMAQ is Congestion Mitigation Air Quality.
We all knew that.
I just like to give my spiel, for those that may not know
No,
what
I'm
the heck
teasing, it's
RSTP
always good
is.
to have a refresher.
Right.
So this year's RSTP is East Eldon Street, and this CMAQ project is for the Herndon Metro Rail Intermodal Access Improvements, or the shortened version is called Bus Bay Project. So, $2.2 million for the application for East Eldon, and up to $700,000 for the CMAQ application for Bus Bays. The $2.2 million is to address last year's and earlier this year construction cost increase for the East Eldon Street project that increased significantly to $4.4 million. So earlier this year, we applied for revenue sharing, a 50-50 match, 2.2 state, 2.2 local match. So this NVTA process for RSTP funding is an application for $2.2 million to serve as the town's local match if we get revenue sharing funding. And that's the plan.
So we're using somebody else's money to be our money to revenue share to get some other money, that's what he's saying.
Because it's not, it's not a team.
And that's cool?
It is,
Okay.
Yes,
Believe it or not.
Can we get
Okay.
a legal opinion?
Actually, our money being
We do
returned
have an
to
ethics
us
policy,
for-
we want to make sure we're adhering to it.
And if
All
by
good.
chance, if you
It's
do not
almost
get
as good
the,
as what we do
All
at
right, you
Rail.
own this, right?
I own this, I own everything, I own this one too.
All right.
and now if you don't get the revenue sharing funding, it is very competitive, but this, still, we go through this process in an effort to lower the town's obligation,
Mhm.
and in an effort to get as much as we can.
Right.
And then the Bus Bay project, $700,000, that effort is to replenish the funds that were taken from, at one time, last year, we had 700,000, we had over 700,000 for phase 2. Those funds were transferred to phase 1 of the Bus Bay project. So this is an effort to replenish lost funds in phase 2. And the idea behind phase 2 for the Bus Bay project is for those improvements that are likely be needed beyond the opening of Metro Rail, whatever they may be.
And just to refresh your memory, phase 1 land acquisition costs were higher than originally designed, originally envisioned, and that's what the $700,000 was moved forward to cover that shortfall. So we get phase 1 underway, and we're looking to backfill phase 2.
Exactly.
And Mark working his magic to do so.
Bill?
You already took care of the RSTP, but the CMAQ, does it have earmark allocation specific, or does it have to be relative to a project that is pertinent to the Metro?
Well, it's the trick, what I don't want to say trick, the idea behind applying for RSTP CMAQ is to keep it general enough to accommodate a likely scenario. Likely there's going to be a need for signalization, likely maybe some transit facilities, bus shelters, intersection enhancement, crosswalk enhancements, bike ped signalization, and to keep it general enough that it's associated with the Herndon Metro Rail Station, but broad enough that anything along Herndon Parkway, between Van Buren and Spring Street, maybe cycle tracks. Right now it's planned for the south side along Herndon Parkway, but maybe someday, we're talking fiscal year 2026.
Sure.
Maybe along the north side of Herndon Parkway.
So signalization, rationalization equals justification?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, my God.
You're kidding, yeah.
Just ignore him.
But eventually, there needs to be a defined scope,
Mm-hmm.
and that it happens in time. But these federal applications at this point, in year 2019 for fiscal year 2026 2026 funding allocation, is to keep it somewhat general, yet specific enough
That you qualify.
Right.
Qualify.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that is why we appreciate what you and you do so much.
Yes.
Because this is a lot of balls in the air to make it work for us, and it is really incredible when we can tell the public how little of these projects sometimes are coming out of the taxpayers' pockets
Mhm.
because of these funding sources that you guys navigate so well. So we really, really appreciate that. Other questions or comments on this item? All right. So I heard someone mention the consent agenda. We could put these two or one or the other on the consent agenda, although people like to hear about free money, but I could go either way. Move it to consent, or we can keep it general. I'm looking for some
Consent
suggestions.
is good.
I like the idea too of advertising free money.
It's just not free money, so.
Well,
Anybody who's.
it's matched, it's potential investment.
In all
It's
that
a
stuff.
return to us of money that we've already been paid as taxpayers, right?
No.
Where did
No.
the money come from?
These grants,
Well, it's
funding
State
sources
of
that Mark
Virginia's
is working
comprised
with.
of 17,300,000.
You know, I can go either way, but I kind of agree with Cesar, and we could have a quick staff
Yeah.
report that basically just points out how we're working to offset the costs of this. Won't have to be a lengthy staff report.
I agree, because people keep talking about these projects, so that way we're
In front of you.
letting them know that they're moving.
What is town doing? What is council doing?
And we're offsetting.
What is staff?
Sorry, Mark, that means you have to come next week. No?
That's fine, I'll keep it short.
Wear a tie.
Without-
You don't have to wear a
Make it
tie.
less complicated.
That's it.
Okay.
Just do it.
If everybody's okay with that, I do
Yeah.
like that idea.
2.9
It'll take an extra 10 minutes. So speaking of the consent agenda, we have several items, and I think they are all appointing people to advisory boards and one award of contract for the Herndon Festival Carnival operations for next year. So, and staff is available for any questions on that. No? All right, so we have reached the discussion item this evening, which is the community donations process that we also often call the grants, but we have realized it's not really grants. Jenny Tripoli and Karen Gagliano, is that correct? All right, are here for the staff presentation. To start the discussion and see if we would like to make any changes or how we like to approach this.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
And thank you. So this item has been on the list of things to talk about, specifically during the April 16th work session. There were some thoughts shared about simplifying this process. Right now, the process entails quite a bit of reporting mid-year, and that's a lot of work for the nonprofits, and frankly, as I look at those reports, they don't really tell me truly that these dollars that we gave went to this specific thing. And in keeping with the spirit of a donation, there usually aren't strings attached to a donation. And so Karen and I put our heads together and took some of the comments under advisement and put together just some suggestions. Put together a little bit of data so you can see the numbers throughout the last couple of years and how they play out. We're not making any recommendations, it's just ideas. You could decide to scrap all of these ideas and go with something completely different. But so what we're really asking for from you is, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but we're getting close to the time when we start communicating with the organizations about sending us in their information. And so we want to understand an approach that works for you. The only thing to keep in mind is again, this is the section of the Code of Virginia that permits the donations, and the only two stipulations are that it is a charitable organization that either operates within our limits or benefits our citizens and is not associated with a church or a sectarian society. That's it. So the application process that they go through, that's where they have to prove that, they're in compliance with that.
When you say it's not associated, it can still be associated, but they can't control it, like
Right, it shall not be
Episcopal church, yeah.
controlled in whole
Yeah.
or in part, yeah.
Yeah.
So, some of the suggestions we have are to retain, again, the current request form, because that's really where we ensure compliance with the Code of Virginia. Remove the interim reporting requirements, because what happens is right now once the grants, I'll get used to it too, the donations are approved, we pay half in July and half in January, contingent upon this reporting, which again, I look at, but without being able to do a full-blown audit, which nobody wants to do, and I'm technically not allowed to do under the Board of Accountancy's rules. It doesn't really tell me much, so.
So we're asking them to do this report that takes a lot of work for them, and are we really getting much out of it? Not really?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
And then the second suggestion would be to just pay 100% of the funds at the beginning of the fiscal year. So, and then any other suggestions that you might be open to. So to give you a sense for how the numbers have looked over the last couple of years, I started with adopted 2020 and worked backwards. So really, if you skip ahead, we're averaging about $210,000 a year, 95% of which goes to HCTV, our Turn-In and Next Stop, and HCTV receives about $100,000 of that. So really what you're dealing with is, and that was an item where HCTV really provides a service to us that allows us to reach our public through television. And so it sounded like from the feedback that one was more of a given. And so the idea would be, okay, HCTV gets $100,000 a year, or whatever the funding level that you decide is gonna be your total level, they get basically 50% of that. And then our Turn-In and Next Stop split 45% of that. So that gets you to roughly $50,000 apiece for them. And that leaves you with $10,000 for the other smaller organizations that come in. And if you look back at the historical data, it really ends up being that way. They ask for and/or we get down to about $10,000 spread across 4 or 5 smaller organizations. One year was more of an exception. We had, I think it was 2018, we had a lot more of the smaller organizations. But in general, you know, you're looking at 4 or 5 of those to simplify it, or whatever you feel is appropriate. I think one of the asks was to have a process that made sense. Some of the ideas that were thrown out were maybe it's a percentage of their donations or percentage of their expenditure budget, but that again gets you into a lot of reporting and kind of takes you away from the spirit of a donation, which is, you know, we're gonna give you this money to support you because you support our residents. So just something to chew on. The last thing I wanna mention is about in-kind donations. We are still working on getting our hands around what the in-kind really costs. Because right now, what we show in the budget and what we're limited to charging is lower than the actual cost. And we wanna be able to present to you what it really costs, so you have more of a sense of, hey, this is not 10,000, this is more like 30,000.
Our intuitive sense is we have been woefully under accounting our in-kind donation costs. I mean, it is a lot higher than it looks.
I would agree
And so
with
we're
that.
trying to get a better firm handle on it, add some transparency to it, and give you a firm number of what this in-kind costs, because it is significant. And again, a lot of my conversations with our folks at the town shop, the operations temple on those guys to support 100 different events throughout the course of the year, not just town events, but community events, is starting to take its toll, and we need to start looking at new and better ways to do that so that they can stay true to the core mission, because it's starting to affect their ability to push for emergency response, on-call response, because they're working all the time with these other things. They don't sign up to go on call, they don't sign up or they don't come in if there's an emergency necessarily, unless they're in certain positions. So it's creating some other secondary and tertiary effects. So we want to get a better understanding of the costs, and we might be back with a better plan on how to staff these other events as we move closer to budget time. So we're working on that right now.
And same with HPD.
Yes, no, they,
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah,
They're
those are the
included.
main ones. Right.
They're certainly included in that conversation as well. It's just I hear it very vocally when I show up to safety briefings at the shop.
Yes. So that's the crux. Again, we're not looking for an answer tonight, just something to chew on. But we do want to know if we should change our communications to the groups this year. It would also require a resolution change, because the details of the whole process are listed out in the resolution.
Sydney, what's the time frame that you need to have that resolution? Because my recollection is that February is when payments are due.
I think you're right,
Applications for
typically it's
donations.
February. We
Yeah,
start.
That's right in front of me, February 1st.
Yep. So,
So
soon-ish, January
The first
timeframe.
meeting in January.
Yeah. Sheila?
I think having one payment is pretty, it's being more cost effective because it takes a lot more staff time for you to get a report and then issue the second check, so I think that's a brilliant idea.
Is all that we really need to know to be in compliance is that they meet the standards of the code section? So if in the initial application, they prove that by their 501c3 or whatever they put in there, we don't really need a mid-year report to go to that. We are gonna be very popular if we get rid of that. I'm just gonna say. Because it is a lot of work.
It's interesting to
Well,
see them, but it's not
But
a
if we're not
value
really
add.
getting a lot of value out of it as the recipient, I am not comfortable asking people to do that level of work, because it's a lot. Cesar, and then I saw another hand.
When you said value, I mean, that just hit me. The only value I see in breaking it up is we're floating some money for 6 months.
And it's a small amount of money.
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Don't get it out of the way.
The interest we make, we could prorate the return on the
What is this,
Combine-
that rate set
Combine the
option?
assets
Yeah, bond it,
and
sure.
put it in Robinhood or something.
So I wanted to throw out this idea. One of the criticisms that I think we've gotten probably every single year on this is that the numbers we decide to give are just arbitrary. You're like, oh, well, we gave them this much last year, we should give them this much next year, and it fluctuates. and realizing this is not a grant, and we're not gonna have a grant committee and make it all that complicated, but is there some value in looking at the way some of the other, like, I think it's the Virginia Commission for the Arts or Arts Fairfax that do give out, I don't know if they're grants or donations, but
They're grants.
for our purposes, it would be a donation. Where we look at the groups, all of the groups, even the small groups that are asking for these donations, to look at having some kind of qualifier on how much they can ask for based on their revenue, or cap it at like a 10 or 15 or 20, I don't know what the number is, but I know that in some of the grant processes, it's like that, because do we want to be in the business of some of these organizations? We've looked at them before and it's like, well, their budget's $7,500 and they're asking for $5,000, we're not gonna give that. Which clearly that makes sense, but there's no policy or any type of across the board way to look at that. So I don't know, I would like to see if there's any interest in that conversation.
Well, we did, I know
Yeah.
when you and I first got on council, we did say that you had to make at least, if you ask for 10,000, you have to bring in your own 10,000. And if you ask for 200, you have to show that you did have 200.
Well, I know the Herndon Village Network would ask for, well, they didn't ask for anything last year, but in years prior, when it was predicated upon basically 10% of their overall assets available, it was a formula that I believe was derived from prior councils. I think it's.
So I used to write grants for a living to these organizations, and what I would say is if it's a donation, it should be a donation. And what we need to figure out is why are we donating? What is it that we're trying to achieve with these donations? Because back when I first started, you had to know that there were grants out there. That it wasn't on the website, there wasn't a form, you just had to be an insider. And the reason for that was that the town council in previous years wanted to create these organizations, which it helped and boosted and supported. But all of them have different business models. So you'll have, a Herndon Village Network, which holds small fundraisers and gets donations and has a certain amount coming in. You'll have an organization that just does performance. You'll have an organization that raises money for scholarships. You'll have an organization that's purely socially, a social service. So why is it that we are giving these donations? And then the other thing is, if we're gonna change anything at all about how we give these donations, we need to do it in a small way. There's been some sort of, periodically someone will say, well, these people don't really need the money, they'll figure it out some other way. And with anything that we do for a nonprofit or to a nonprofit, we should do it in a very incremental way. So if we have a lack of funds, if we have a year that we don't really have a lot of excess money, I think we need to think about the expectations that we've created with these organizations, and what are we gonna do when somebody says, well, we need another police officer, we can't really afford to give money to, these nonprofits. So there's a lot of questions that I think we're not really capable of answering tonight.
I guess, well, go ahead.
The other consideration that I didn't put on here is what do you want to do when the Arts Center comes online? Because that comes with a whole different set, and does one supplant the other? So there are broader considerations.
Sure.
So I didn't make clear that this is kind of the short term
Right.
for
For the budget.
pre-Arts Center budget, but to your point, there are longer term considerations, of course, as you know.
So I guess, I agree with everything you just said, but I wonder if, it could very well happen that one year, there's a recession and we just cannot make these donations.
Yeah.
And if we're giving amounts that are, large amounts that organizations are counting on, and they're gonna really struggle or fail if they don't get it, I'm a little worried about us being in that position too. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Compared to or do you want to go, you haven't spoken yet?
No, but I think you were gonna mention the percentage
Sure.
to the budget.
Yeah.
That these donations are. Let's just put that on too.
Yeah.
But I was gonna suggest because I had a lot of things that came up last night, and this discussion kind of made me think. We were going to do some sort of strategic planning or retreat or something. I'd like to suggest we add this, charging stations, surveys, I mean, just all this stuff that I think as a body we need to get aligned on in terms of like our strategic vision. What do we want out of these organizations? What's the desired outcome? If we're gonna give them money, we're basically entering into a long-term partnership. And I think those are the things I'd like to, just as a body, just, even if we don't agree on everything, just, here are the things, top 3, top 5, top 10 things. I suggest we schedule that, because I'm new, and I haven't seen anything like that. So that might help us, just a thought.
Totally agree. Well, back on the grants, I think it's a very small percentage of our budget. Part of the reason they got started years and years ago is the reason we are almost to an art center. And I think if we just throw these things out, and HCTV is half of it.
I'm not suggesting we throw that out.
Yeah.
The point that I'm making is that it is a drop in the bucket for our
It is,
budget, but
yeah.
for these organizations, for some of them,
Yes.
it's a lot of their budget. And so I'm not sure that anyone that's applying for these grants, no matter how big or small they are, donations, however big or small they are, is thinking that maybe they won't get it one day.
Can I clarify a point? Because
Yes.
we touched on HGTV. HGTV, we have to be careful with
Yeah.
because we get peg fees from Cox
That's right.
Communications as part of the franchise
Yep.
arrangement. It is a payment into the general fund. Now, under the INET contract, we can only use peg fees for certain things. Providing peg television access is one of those things, as is paying for our INET fiber, maintaining our INET fiber. The reason why we got because we pay that money into a payment fee for INET fiber, we had that INET fiber fixed in 8 hours yesterday as opposed to days. We could use it for certain things for telecommunications purposes, but there's a list of criteria that has to be spent on,
Right.
and HGTV is the lion's share of those peg fees.
So I think
if
I
can
would like to
finish.
have,
No,
May
I'm
I
sorry, I
finish?
just wanted to just clarify the HGTV.
Well, no, HCTV,
Yeah.
we want to televise our meetings, so if we just say we're not going to give them any, then we're probably not going to have any televised meetings. So that's like, it's there. But on the others, if you look at part of our vision, it's part of our vision. So, I mean, why would we not try our best to make sure we do these grants? So I mean, that's like saying we're not picking up the trash, or we're not picking up the leaves, or no more snow removal because we're having a recession. People would be rioting in the streets.
I don't think that anyone
Yeah.
is suggesting that we stop giving
No,
these
no, no.
donations. I mean, everybody
Right.
wants to, and right now we have the luxury of having, in my opinion, the luxury of a council that's all in on this. But we have been here when it was a dogfight, and this
Yeah.
council isn't gonna be the same forever. So I'm trying, I guess my thought is just trying to protect these organizations so that if the council in the future is not able to provide some of these larger donations that people are used to, they don't go under, because that doesn't help our mission and what we're trying to accomplish in the town with these nonprofits either.
So I totally support that, and I think we should try to protect and preserve this into the future. So maybe there's other ways we can support their growth, or their stability beyond just giving them checks, right? I mean, so maybe it's infrastructure support. I don't know what that is, I don't claim to know what that is, but maybe just giving them money isn't the only way we can help them. So maybe that's a discussion we can have, you know, over some beers and brainstorming.
We'll solve all the world's
Yeah.
problems.
Well, I mean, I wanna get creative on just looking beyond the dollars.
Well, I just really do wanna just throw it out there again, like Sheila and I remember in the early days, we would be in here for 2.5 hours arguing about whether we should give $25,000 or $30,000 to Art Herndon. I mean, in a $58 million budget, it's not a good
$25 or
use of time.
$30.
Well, right, so at this place in time, things are really different, but it hasn't always been this way, and it might not always be this way, so I just think they need to think broader from right where we are sitting still, and then pretty.
Two things, it's kind of to Cesar's point, my father used to say, sometimes you don't need someone to build you a boat, you just need wind for the sail. So, sometimes it's, and not to put you on the spot, but typically, just so people can have I guess, context for this, what would, like, you know, when you talk about, what would a point for, like, when you talk about like a tax rate, what would a point be equivalent to in Herndon, so that they can visualize that.
Sure. So penny on the real estate tax rate is about $453,000. So
Okay.
you're looking at about a half penny on the real estate tax rate
So
with
half-
that
yeah,
level.
yeah.
So, and one thing, again, if you keep it fixed,
Mhm.
let's say that's an option, then it's predictable
Right.
year after year.
If I
But
could just
can we
caution you for
obligate-
consistency, his pay fees would take out half of that. So-
Correct.
So
Correct.
so just for.
Do we have to even talk about
accuracy.
HCTV with this donation?
Yeah, we should.
Will they take that
I
off?
feel like it's so
There's
different.
not
No,
a
but
question
they just,
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
sometimes.
that's, yeah.
Yes.
And-
I just wanna
and
make sure
that's-
her half
Look at
penny
that
was
rate.
put context, because it's really not a half
But it's
penny.
really a quarter,
It's a quarter.
Right,
see,
correct.
practically nothing.
So tonight, I'm sorry, I think Pradeep had something to say, I apologize.
I agree with most of the conversation going on in here, so I think we should have some sort of, I would say, criteria in terms of, defining, because there are many nonprofits within the town of Vernon, and if everybody applies for the donation, then what is the criteria? And I would say one thing is the value driven. What kind of value that organization has added to the people, to the town. For example, we're talking about the TV, right? So it has added monetary value. Talking about Arts Herndon, it is bringing the vibrant community and, branding Herndon as a arts community and all those kind of things. So, and when we give them money, we are building, I agree with Councilmember De La Guela that we're building partnership. But when we are building partnership, maybe we can have some sort of agreement that, we will support you up to certain point, up to that time. Maybe our donation will phase out certain, like maybe 50%, 25%, but at that time, with our support, you have to be able to self-support yourself. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years from now, we want you to grow, but at the same time, we will just, take the control or donation, little phase out a little bit, maybe 10, 20, 30% a year, and then at some point, we want you to succeed, and we are always there to support you. Some kind of, may not be exactly what I said here.
Right, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Can I just say that there is no arts organization in the world that is self-supporting?
That's true.
So if we say to our arts organizations, you have to be the only arts organization in the world that can make a profit. I think what we have to say is this is one of the many things that this town sees as its vision, and we will support you to the best of our ability, and we're in a partnership. And when we can't afford to give you money, we won't be able to give you money. But when we can give you money, and you need the money, then we will.
Well, I think what I heard was sort of mirroring what you had said, that like if we're gonna make any change, and that's an if, I don't think we're making any decision tonight, that it would need to be incremental. And I think that's
Yeah,
the example you were
it's
giving,
not-
may not be
it's not just
exactly
about
that,
the arts
but
Herndon,
we can't
it's
say,
about
we
all
gave you
the
100,000 last year, and this year we're giving you 10, like that.
No.
I mean, we could, but that would be a blow, right?
It would, yeah.
So,
That's not a partnership.
that's not a partnership,
Right,
exactly.
Art is symbiotic to me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you
both
can, and you communicate, and I think that's a problem that maybe we haven't really communicated very well back and forth between each other, the arts organizations and the town. Go ahead.
And may I just say that if we, as a town, decided to do this on our own, it would cost way, way more money. The number of people that will volunteer to help put things on, and I will compare the arts to Parks and Rec. Do you wanna get rid of Parks and Rec if they aren't self-supporting? Heck no. Parks and Recs adds value. All these wonderful parks we have in town, some people may never go to the rec center, but they sure go to the parks, whether they're the active parks or the natural parks, whatever. So this is what makes Herndon this place. So if we start saying everything's gotta pay for itself,
So I think we're
Yeah.
getting in the weeds, because what we're trying to
We're very
decide is,
passionate.
what changes are we gonna make that will simplify this process? And some of the suggestions were retaining the current application form, which requires them to say that, yes, we comply with the state code of why we can give town money. The suggestion of removing the interim reporting requirements because it's a lot of work and doesn't have a lot of
Yes.
value for anyone. I'm totally on board with that, if there's no heartburn from staff.
No.
Do I have other friends that are on board, 'cause it's not just me?
Yes.
And giving one check at the beginning of the year?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
fine.
So have we ever, we don't have to research this, but I'm guessing we haven't ever gone, never mind, we're not giving you the second half. I mean, it would have to be really detrimental, and we're obviously not going down that road. Is there anything else that, were those just the main things that would simplify it from your perspective?
Some other thoughts that came to mind, especially for the remaining 10,000, we could do a lottery system, maybe first come, first serve.
On HCTV, that would be awesome.
That's not the remaining.
So, but wait, so are we
10,000.
making the
No,
decision
we
that
have a
this is what we're
lottery.
doing?
Lottery,
100,
A physical
50, and
lottery,
50?
pulling out balls.
Like you would get a number, so just, that's why there aren't 10,000 slides, because there are 10,000 ideas. So taking cable off the table because of the PEG fees, you're left with about 110,000, right? If the assumption is that about 45% of that, or, about 50,000, 45,000 each goes to our turn-in and Next Stop, that leaves you with 10, which is usually the smaller organizations. So, you could have some sort of system where it's kind of first come, first served. For the smaller ones, we have 10,000 to give, or some sort of lottery system or something.
I like the NBA weighted lottery system, just have them posted on the wall.
A draft.
10 balls for the one with the most money and then like 3 balls for the.
But just throwing out ideas, it's the ask all the questions moment. But it's up to you, what you
So my
think is
question is,
appropriate.
if we decide that this is what we're gonna do, we can decide that for this next budget, but we can't obligate future councils to definitely do this, right?
Right.
So is this still an annual conversation of, hey, are we gonna do this and save ourselves a lot of heartburn at the budget season, and now we're just kind of dickering over the 10,000?
Or it could be a conversation we have now, and then if it comes up again to change it, that's when it comes up.
Well, again, you don't codify this to adopt a budget. So this could be
Right.
the policy document that sits out there, the governing staff as we assemble the budget. Future councils can come in and go, no, I don't like those numbers, zero this out, add this to it, and do whatever they want. And then we're not obligating to spend that money, we're just saying that's our starting point to have this discussion.
Well, this would certainly give our major nonprofits the ability to budget and plan if they knew that more than likely this is I mean, anything can happen during the budget, but if this is what we're talking about for 6 months, I would be shocked if at the final budget hearing someone made a major amendment.
Yeah.
It's happened before, but it's not ideal.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is we go into assembling the budget, it's good for us to know where your mind is, so we start crafting it in that way. And that's what I think was the purpose of this policy.
And that 10,000 we would go over would be 2/1,000th of a point, or 2/100th of a point that we'd be arguing about, so it takes the politics out of that as well.
So writing these the grant application, I kind of zipped through it for old time's sake. And if we're just doing a donation, can we just ask them if they're a 501c3, how many years they've been in business, and
1040 easy.
and their 1040, or their Form 990, and then just a little paragraph about what they do for the town, so that we have it
Can it be
on
outside?
file, and
Yeah,
have
that's fine.
it, not this big, because I remember, Nancy Rose spends months in, tearing her hair out, and so did I.
That's ridiculous.
And,
Yeah.
and,
Well, and Friday Night Live is a whole different ballgame too, then, how does this play into that? Because that's the in-kind piece, right, which is still out there and things.
This grant process form was created at another place, another time, when we were talking about these as grants. We've since come to read the state code and realize that grants have a total different connotation than donations. And we shifted that about 2 years ago into a donations realm, where it was much more defined under the code, that we could authorize our expenditures in that way. So I have no problem with making that more in line with the donations elements and simplifying that form.
just make sure that we're covering, or in case we need to.
We'll check the
report it.
boxes under the code that we have to check.
So
and-
for
we're good.
organizations like Friday Night Live and Jam Brew, if they were to come back, because they would ask for a small amount of cash, but mostly in kind. So
Right.
is their process gonna be simplified in the same manner without the interim reporting?
Let us hold on the in-kind question until we get a better handle on what in-kind looks like. Because the problem is that I think we need to start talking about in-kind in terms of how many hours of staff time do we need, and let us compute how much that in-kind looks, as opposed to them saying 10,000 in-kind, when in actuality it could be
Right.
times that much.
Right.
Right.
Again, we don't know. So I think we should be looking at that in terms of requirements. What do you require for in-kind donations? Let's then assign, then let us
And then
assign a
we'll
number
do the
to it.
math.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll do the math.
But it seems that the process could still be simplified. And
Sure.
getting rid of this interim reporting will.
Interim reporting,
Doug Downer
that-
may throw a parade, because he does exactly like Nancy Rose, it takes forever and.
Interim
we-
reporting
that-
again, we don't see the value in it.
Well, good.
Sorry, just one last idea before I forget about it. Regarding in-kind, one of the things I've seen some organizations do is they allow their employees 2, 4, 6 hours per month.
Yes.
To volunteer or donate their time on a
Mhm.
project event. Maybe that's something we could consider.
We
Yeah,
have.
I've actually looked at that.
We have looked at that. We have, and I need to circle back with Tanya and see where that is. Because we were on the cusp of doing an AR for allowing town-paid time to go to a volunteer organization. But I think, now it's starting to come back to me, I think we're having problems with, if somebody lives in West Virginia and they donate their time to the West Virginia Red Cross, does that still count?
Well, no, for me, it would
And-
have to be town
And
specific.
we're having a hard time wrapping ourselves with how to control that.
No.
So,
Okay.
so I think just the implementation, we're kind of going around, I'll bring it back up to Tanya, but I
Yeah.
think when we left off, because we were all jazzed on that, we were trying to get that done
I forgot we
like 2
talked
years
about
ago. And it was how, because I wanted it in town as well, and how do we verify that that actually occurred in town? Do they get a letter from the agency? What is involved here? And we just had some hard time with implementation of that idea. So let me circle back to Tanya and see.
It could be like volunteer hours that kids in high school have to do, it's basically somebody signs off on it. It doesn't have to
It's not
necessarily be a
mandatory,
huge.
right?
Right, no, it's not
No, it doesn't have to be a
mandatory,
big
not
auditing
voluntary,
kind of
but that was something we
situation.
were looking at like 2 years ago, and we got to a point and we just couldn't get it across the finish line.
Right.
So that would kind of align with like where we as a town,
Mhm.
if we're investing in these partnerships and growing them, I just think that's another tool to leverage.
Yep.
Right, so you know what the direction from us on simplification, TBD on in-kind and what that looks like.
And what we can do is either we can use their, whatever hours they have contributed and how much town pays, based on that, we can do the math and then find out the in-kind contribution
Right.
volunteer hours. Or another one is the national average, which is I think $23.69 per hour or something. I was looking at it last time.
Yeah.
A few days ago.
It's
So,
impressive.
yeah, so when we do that, then that way also we can find how much we have. I'm pretty sure we have donated so much in kind, and that we probably will be able to
And
track.
if we're
this as well.
simplifying this form, I'm sure people would love it if it could be an online application process. I know that
All
complicates things
about
sometimes,
online
but
everything.
I hear that all the time, so.
Yeah.
I don't
That
know.
would be wonderful.
If it's a more simple form that doesn't require you to attach tax returns and all this stuff that we were
Well, that
requiring
would
before.
be the rub, is having it a secure portal, because the tax form would be required.
Yeah.
But it's
that's for
something we can
nonprofit.
consider.
Sorry, I'm back on.
You know, it's just citrus.
Or we can do
Okay.
the online form and then have them drop off or mail the tax forms later. At least they can do all the other process online, and then they can, the attachment, whatever is needed, they can, drop off or they can mail.
Okay. Right, so we'll circle back on that. All right, thank you. We have
Thank you
reached
very much.
roundtable. Who would like to start us off?
I'll start off.
Okay, sir. Go ahead.
Just want to say happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving, and that's all I got.
All right, who's next?
I have absolutely nothing to report.
Thank you for reporting that.
All right, I'll note that. Sydney, you just want to go next?
I want to go next. I wanted to mention that Sheila and Jen Baker and I went to the Fabulous 40s fundraiser for our tournament, and they have cleared, we believe, about $4,000 as a fundraiser, and they're getting ready for a Mardi Gras masquerade for February 22nd. So please mark your calendars, because it was so fun. We had someone teaching us how to do swing dancing at the Fabulous 40s, and I got a lot of pictures of Jen and Evan Hoffman dancing. It was
I
really.
gotta see those.
It was really fun.
And so what did you say the amount was, 40,000? Or
4,000.
4,000,
But they
that was
kind of
raised
threw
that
it
night.
together at the last minute. I was impressed that they managed to raise that much money in such a short time, but, it's Kevin, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
know Kevin's
Opens
parties.
up,
And it was a huge band.
It was a huge band, 17-piece jazz band. It was so fun. And we had barbershop and everything like that. But anyway, I wanted to ask, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this tonight, but I'm afraid I'll forget. I was struck yesterday by the fact that we have so many documents that the staff hasn't had time to revise in years. And wondering if we should put together, it's just a theory, a small ad hoc committee of people, like a towns member, a council member, and a committee member, a commission member, to read through these documents and make recommendations to the staff so that there's more input from us, different stakeholders. And it's maybe would save staff time. I don't know if it would, but that was my thought, because I
By
felt really bad. about that.
Documents, you mean like
The
guidelines?
practices and.
Because I know we've
guidelines.
gone through in my 3 years, we have updated probably 3/4 of our ARs and brought
Okay.
them out of the 90s into the 20 teens. And
Miss Yates
What's an
digitized the
annual?
entire legal process.
administrative regulations.
Okay.
So
So-
3/4 of them have been changed, and the other quarter have been reviewed, and they're sufficient, so they stay in place.
Okay.
But again, we've been taking a systemic approach in personnel. We're doing HPRB, the comprehensive plan gets reviewed every 5 years, so there's something in there. Well, let us do this, let us go back and sort of ask the department heads to just kind of look through some of their external facing documentation. So we're doing this internally, you have some new blood, new eyes, looking at things. Let us take a look at some of the external facing documentation, get a list together and see how big the scope of the problem is before we launch into an idea. And I can report that scope back to you.
Because I feel bad knowing that the staff is busting their butts in every different direction, and, you know, and then I'll say,
Mhm.
you know, what is the form for this? And they'll say, well, we haven't really reviewed it in 20 years, so there are some things missing in that and I can see it causing problems.
And a lot of the areas where we are seeing it is in code updates, and where we come up to problems in code, we sit down with Lisa, we try to revise and get that in front of you to make some updates. And it's something that I've talked to staff about, you know, I remember a conversation with Lisa Dillon at one point about a portion of code that was very difficult to navigate for a developer, and I went, is this purposely murky to give us latitude, or is it just annoyingly murky because it's old? And the answer was annoyingly murky, so let's look at updating that and getting that squared away and tighten it up a little bit. So we are actively looking for those things. Let's get a list together, and then let's see how bad the problem is before there's.
I don't want to put you to any more trouble. I just was hoping that there was some way that.
I'm not doing
It has kind of been an ongoing theme of, oh, we haven't looked at this in
And then
25 years.
every time the General Assembly comes up with something new, we have to run around changing anyway,
Right.
so.
And
I
that's-
mean,
and that's Lisa
It's a
going to town.
constant.
Thanks a lot, Dylan Rule.
Yeah.
Just saying.
All right, thank you, Signy. Sheila or Cesar?
Yeah, thank you. I thought yesterday's work session with HPRB was good. Yeah, I thought.
It was a good discussion.
Learned a lot, different perspectives, different views. I thought then, and kind of mentioned it tonight, sort of like a council, like planning session, because a couple things I wrote down that might be council discussion in like a planning session. This whole, like, we're kind of like the legislators, and then we're kind of like the judicial folks when it,
Arbitration.
Yeah, I mean, I just, philosophically, I have a concern with that, or issue. I don't know if anyone else does, but I don't necessarily want to be in a position where we're ruling on something that we've written. To me, that's kind of a conflict. The whole, you know, Constitution separates those quasi-powers, right? You know what I'm saying?
I tend to agree, because in New Jersey, for example, I know that the planning commission, once they rule on something, it's final. If they want to appeal, it goes someplace else, like we never, because we would delegate the powers to the planning commission.
Yeah, I mean, it came up, I thought I'd throw it out, maybe that's a discussion, if we do have a plan.
I agree. I actually followed up with the town manager and the town attorney this morning about several things, and that was one of them. And it's such a different role when you are doing the appeal.
Right.
It's
Correct.
nothing like anything else we're
Yes,
doing. And
no.
I had wondered aloud, and I don't know the ramifications of this, like, is this something that perhaps the, we wanna task, or consider tasking, or look and see what might happen if the Board of Zoning Appeals was where the appeal went? I don't know, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah, that's a discussion.
Lisa Gates is like,
I'm cringing because that has really significant legal ramifications that Lisa Gilbert's
well,
also.
this is why I'm like, I
Or
don't know.
because they get sworn in.
Well, no, because there's.
To the PBAC committee.
No, that's the reason, and I didn't just like pull that out of the
No,
air, like,
no,
in,
no.
in Fairfax County, a lot of their, special exceptions go
Yes.
to BZA, and so maybe these are
Not-
totally different animals.
Not specifically HPRB things,
Okay.
yes. Special exceptions in other places are sometimes handled
Okay,
by
so maybe I'm
BZA.
totally wrong, but I'm like, in the
Um,
same vein, like that, they are more of
yeah.
a, the reason I thought it is, they are more of a judicial type body, and this is a judicial
Correct,
type
correct.
decision, so.
And although we were in a courtroom on Wednesday, we're not really a judicial body in that sense, you know, I mean, at least not in my mind.
So I think that we've proven that this merits a discussion.
Okay, and if we're gonna have those discussions, I love this charging station thing, the Tesla from a draw, I mean, that type of strategic discussion I wanna have. Art Center, I mean, I think we need a strategic plan for that and all this other stuff, but I think it's good, so I don't know what the status of that is, but.
With your indulgence, I'll get Dennis working on the Tesla charging stations.
Yeah, he brought that up, we haven't talked about it in several years, but it was, it definitely is a draw for
Right.
people who.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so we can get them started.
Well, and I love the
Get them
free
started for a
advertising by
conversation.
Elon Musk for people to
Yeah,
come.
I mean, we wanna be a destination, so I think that fits within that sort of
Absolutely.
profile of
Right,
the town.
I don't know what's involved in getting on that list, but Dennis, I'm sure does.
Yes, so I'll get Dennis on that. As far as the other things and what we talked about earlier, give me a day.
Okay.
And then I'll send something out to you all on
Yeah,
that.
just going into next year, and I think it's good that we all get aligned on what
Right.
the initiatives are.
And then I got to go to the Pinnacle where Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee come together. Went to Ewing, Virginia, and visited my son and my future daughter, and took my adopted son. Pradeep went with us. Pradeep.
Pradeep.
Well, I was like, wait a minute.
Congratulations.
I didn't realize you were adopted.
Adopted Pradeep.
Wait, you're 18, right? So
Oh, my goodness.
Uh-oh.
I was talking to him earlier, they know each other. So that was fun, and we went to the Pinnacle before we ate the turkey. So we kinda got our, boosting that. But one thing I noticed, here I am in this very rural area, and everybody's putting metal roofs on their house because they've asked. And it just kind of boggles my mind when we get people's head around, they don't wanna have to put a metal roof because it costs too much. When I was visiting in Alabama the last time, my sister had put one on, and I'm like, what's with the metal roofs everywhere? And she's like, man, they insulate better, and I'm like, kicking myself for not putting one on my house when I built it, but, because it will have to be replaced eventually. But anyway, had a good time with them, and totally enjoyed the HPRB conference, and I think we should probably get together with them maybe once or twice a year, just.
Well, I would like to
Yeah.
compliment that. I think that when the guidelines are actually released, we absolutely all need to sit around the table
Yeah.
and look at them together and read
100%.
through them and just
100%.
see if it's working as well as we hope. 'Cause it's my great hope that how much more organized and clear and the flow charts when they're appropriate, it's gonna hopefully alleviate some of this uncertainty and all the craziness, because people just wanna know what they can do.
Flow
And they want
charts.
some help doing it. So, I'm sorry, I
No,
started.
that was good.
I just wanted to share that the town manager and attorney and I had the opportunity to meet with Delegate Boysko and, Senator Boysko and Delegate Samira last week about our legislative program and talked through all of those issues with them. They were on board and excited about it. It was a great meeting. Today, the Leadership Fairfax group, several of you have done that. I know Signe and Sheila have done Leadership Fairfax and maybe others. And they have their big project that they do. And a group came today that is focusing on affordable housing. They came by my office and were just asking us about Herndon, and so I shared what we had done at the work session, the information we had. And they're also connecting with Kim Plum and Kathy Hutchins, and they're meeting with Tom Fleetwood next week. I'm gonna connect them with Corey Laws, because they're just trying to get a real sense of what's going on, so I thought you'd be interested in that. And I'm looking forward to the homes tour and the tree lighting. I will be there. I was supposed to go to Norfolk for a VML, but everybody flaked out, so that's not happening. So I'll be there to light the tree. I'm excited. And then the next week is Winter Market, which apparently has 10,000 likes on Facebook. So speaking of overtime and DPW and HPD, I think it's gonna be quite the event, so. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, I noticed that Bill McKenna was wearing his all-black shirt, and I was wondering if he would grace us with the haka.
Oh, I would do the haka dance?
Yes.
I would do it, but it's very loud and I can actually do it.
You can do
Is it louder than War Eagle?
It's very, oh God,
Oh,
they
yeah.
scream.
Oh,
It's
Google New Zealand rugby haka, and
All right.
yeah, it's the pre-match routine.
I had to call on the
Priceless.
town manager.
It's priceless.
It is, I'll pull it up for you later to show it after the meeting.
Have anything else for us,
That's
Mr.
it,
Town
that's all.
Manager?
We're all good.
All right, on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
All those in favor say
Aye.
aye. Those opposed, we are adjourned at 8:40 PM.